When people talk about Frank Zappa, often the albums that are brought up are Apostrophe and Joe's Garage and all kinds of other classic Zappa albums. But one of the most underrated albums is Sleep Dirt. And today I'm going to analyze the chords in it, and so that'll give you a little bit more of an insight into this brilliant guitar duet between Frank Zappa and James Birdleg's Human. So before I get into the more detailed analysis of this song, I'm going to kind of talk about more of the surface level things that I think is really cool about this song. Now, number one, it almost seems like this is sort of something Frank was noodling around with, like maybe some kind of warm-up exercise, and it turned into this really cool song. Kind of like what happened with Thunderstruck by AC/DC or Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses. And Frank seemed to have a real, just amazing intuition, you know, about just even stuff that sounded very ordinary, or rather, it didn't sound ordinary, but the ordinary things he could make sound extraordinary. So that's one thing I noticed. It seems like something he was just kind of noodling around with and made this super cool song. It's actually one of my favorite Zappa songs of all time. Now, another thing that I thought was interesting is all the while he's using that D string as a drone. Now, when we hear a chord, our ears most often hear the low note and the high note, the lowest note and the high note. And normally when there's a drone, it's always like on the low end, you know, stuff like that kind of thing. So the fact that he put that drone right in the center is pretty clever. I like that. So now that I've gone over the surface level things, let's get more into the analysis. So it starts with a B minor 9. Then it goes down. Now, I've seen some analysis of this online, and this is my own personal complete analysis. A lot of people think this is an A flat chord of some type, but I'm not convinced at all, because what this seems like to me is a first inversion E7 chord without the root note, so no E. We've got the third, we've got the seventh, the flat seventh, then we've got the B. And also in B melodic minor, E7 is the diatonic 4 chord of B melodic minor. That is when you're talking about seventh chords. Now, something really interesting happens here. Of course, a lot of interesting things happen in this song, but then it goes down. So let's analyze that. So D major over F sharp. That's very, very clear. We've got our F sharp, our D, and our A. But what comes after that makes me wonder about that D. Now, if we break that down, it certainly looks like a spread triad G minor, which it is. But people often think that that's just a plain old G minor triad, and it isn't. See, when Frank is playing the melody, and there's a D right there, D major, he does that, and then he lands on that F natural right after that spread triad is played. So G, B flat, D, and F. That's a G minor 7 chord. So now the question is, well, what about the D major chord in this case? Because if you look at the diatonic chords of D major, G is also a major chord, right? Here's our D, is 1, 4. It's a G major chord. But this one is minor. In fact, it's a minor 7 chord. So what's going on here is Frank is actually borrowing from a parallel mode. So he's temporarily assuming a tonic function of D just because he can. Of course, D major is the diatonic 3 chord in B natural minor, but he's borrowing from the parallel mode of D minor to get this minor 7 chord. So then, I thought that was super clever. We get and now this is the third time that progression goes, which is also a little bit odd, because obviously things usually repeat in 2s and 4s, or groups of 4s and 8s, and he's doing this a 6-bar progression. So here's where it gets even more interesting. So he goes from this. Now, I actually saw some analyses online that claimed this was an F chord, and I don't believe it's an F chord of any kind at all. So you check this out. Firstly, like, sometimes you've got to look a little bit deeper within the chord, because the bass note isn't always really going to dictate the chord necessarily. Like, it's not like this is an F chord just because the F is on the bottom. So anytime you're trying to like transcribe or analyze something, just take the chords out, put it on a piece of paper. You know, write the names of the notes out on the piece of paper and shuffle the notes around. See if you can come up with something that actually looks more familiar. Now here, we've got F, D, and A flat. D, F, A flat. It's a D diminished triad. Okay, so that's a D diminished triad. However, what it really is, I believe, it's an E7 flat 9 with a sharp 9 over F. So the flat 9 is actually in the bottom. Why Frank decided to do that, I don't know. Because the F goes back to in the bass, the F goes back down to B. And that's a pretty ugly bass motion. But it's kind of cool. It's sort of jarring, you know, and then it takes us back down to sort of that comfort of home in that B minor 9 chord. So let's analyze that weird chord, the altered chord, a little bit more. Now when Frank's soloing, he plays the C sharp up here. He lands on it more than once. So let's try to see if we can make a little more sense of this. So the D is open, but I'm going to bring this up 12 frets to the octave. So now we have this. And now if we take this F note and we bring it down to the 12th fret, okay, that's an E13 chord. But if we move this up, now we get like an E13 with a flat 9 in the bottom. And E7 is the diatonic 7th chord, the 4 of B melodic minor. So it doesn't quite give us sort of that 5-to-1 cadence, sort of that familiar kind of, you know, fuzzy, warm 5-to-1 cadence thing. Gives us a flat 5-to-1 sound in the bass. But it creates a beautiful tension here, and down here it goes back to home. Right? So it's got a very cool element of tension and release throughout this whole song. And I've said this once and I've said it again, but music, movies, literature, art, whatever, you know, paintings, whatever it is, always has elements of tension and release. A great jazz solo or a great rock solo has tension and release. There's always some kind of a apex, or there's sort of like hills and valleys kind of going throughout the whole solo. So it goes back to B minor 9. So at about the 44-second mark, he goes here. Now you can see that as a C sharp diminished with a 9. Okay. This being the root, that being the 3rd, and then this being the 9. I'm talking diatonically within the B minor scale. You might be able to see this as a D major 7 with a 9. Kind of whichever way you look at it, though, it's still diatonic to the D minor, the B minor scale. And it goes back to B minor 9. Now watch out, 'cause now we're going. D9 chord. It goes down to D major 7 with the 9 over C sharp. Always touching back to that B minor 9. Super cool. And then it goes, and this kind of has a D major 7 sharp 5 sound to me. So sharp 5 being this A sharp. It's a 3 chord of B melodic minor. Then D major 7 over A. Now here's where it gets a little strange. Now if you have an idea of what this next chord is, please let me know in the comments, but also if you can, try to explain where you think it comes from. This one is a little strange. So like, we've got a G sharp in the bottom, or A flat. You've got D, the drone, the ever-present D drone, and then a C sharp, or D flat. So what is that? Is that like a third inversion B flat 7 with a sharp 9? You know, like, what is that exactly? I don't know. I put B flat 9 over A flat there in the tab. But you could just see it as sort of a passing tone. He's basically just doing this cool root movement. And at one point he starts playing a lot of bluesy licks over that in B minor. So he's kind of, it's almost like a blues turnaround. We got G, D, and C sharp, which I think might be a G7 sharp 11. Now, he could be borrowing once again from the D melodic minor, you know, because those notes are part of the D melodic minor, and it is a 4 chord to get a Lydian sound in that particular mode. But that's kind of what it sounds like to me. Again, comment below if you have a different opinion. But then he goes, so we started off, so that's G major. So once he gets down here in the first time around, it's very dark. Like, that is not a very bright chord to me, especially when picked individually. And then it goes up to G minor 7. So kind of a darker sound, but now up to the light. But now he's borrowing that from D. So before, when he was doing the parallel modes in D, D major and D minor, he was borrowing the G minor 7 from the parallel minor. But now we've got this huge descend, and he starts the borrowing early. So G7 is definitely part of that D melodic minor, except that in this particular chord shape, we only have the root 5th and the sharp 5, the sharp 4. But then it goes, now why does that work? Just listen to it. Sounds great. And I think that'll about do it. Now, as far as the form goes, what you saw was basically like the two main parts of the song. James Euman, I believe the guitar player's name, James Birdlegs Euman. You can hear him after he kind of goes through the 30th bar. He goes back to the beginning and he repeats a bunch of that, and he does it 2 times, I believe, up till about, I think he does go up to the D, if I'm trying to remember correctly. So I'm not going to say like what the form is. I mean, if anything, it's probably like A, B, A, A, if anything. And also the track just abruptly ends because James Euman, the famous, my fingers got stuck, you know, that whole line. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. If you want to support more, please subscribe and help me improve the quality of the videos, as well as so that I can keep making them. And by the summer, I'm definitely going to launch a Patreon page, which will have far more transcriptions and analysis and all types of good stuff. So be on the lookout for that. Keep watching. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.